I want you to picture this with me. A coffin, polished black, reflecting the pale sun. A crowd dressed in black too, though some of their faces were anything but mourning. And me, standing there at the age of 12, in shoes that were too tight, staring down at the only woman who had ever truly loved me, my mother. I still remember the smell of the flowers. Lilies. Too sweet, almost suffocating, as if they were mocking me with their false beauty. Everyone whispered the same empty words, "She's in a better place." But what did that even mean? Because the place I was left in, it was hell. Before I continue the story, kindly, like, subscribe and tell us where you're listening from. Right beside the coffin stood my stepmother, already holding my arm as if I were some accessory. She dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, pretending to cry. But I'll never forget it, the way she turned her head ever so slightly to check who was watching before pressing the cloth against her face. That woman's tears were never for my mother. They were for the audience. Even at 12, I could feel the coldness radiating off her. While I was shivering from grief, she was calculating. And the moment the burial ended, she leaned down, whispering in my ear so low that no one else could hear. "Don't think this means life will get easier. You're mine now." That was my welcome into her world. A world where kindness was rationed, where every piece of food, every piece of clothing, every night under her roof was treated not as care, but as debt. Let me tell you something, grief makes you quiet. It makes you small. And in that silence, she thrived. The very first night, she made me sleep on the living room floor. I can still feel the rough carpet against my cheek. When I asked why I couldn't sleep in my bed, she said, because that room belonged to her. And she's gone. Don't you think it's time you grew up? I cried until I couldn't breathe. But she didn't care. She closed the door and left me there, surrounded by shadows. And that became a pattern. She took everything familiar and twisted it until I doubted whether I even deserved comfort. Meals were another weapon. Some nights she cooked for herself and told me I could figure something out if I was hungry. Other nights she slid a plate toward me, but not without reminding me, "You better remember who feeds you." That phrase haunted me. Because behind those words was a threat, that my survival wasn't guaranteed. But here's the thing, people saw her differently. Out in public, she played the role of the doting widow who had taken in her late husband's child. Neighbors praised her. Church people clapped her on the back. "What a strong woman," they said. "What a saint." I wanted to scream the truth at them, that behind closed doors she wanted me invisible, powerless, broken. But who would believe a grieving boy over a woman so skilled at wearing masks? So, I stayed quiet. I endured. But deep down, a seed had been planted that day at the funeral. A seed of suspicion. Because when I replayed my mother's death in my mind, something never sat right. See, my mom didn't just die. She died suddenly. No warning, no illness. I was told it was stress. That word was thrown around like it explained everything. But I saw things a child shouldn't have to notice. The late-night arguments. The man who came to the door once, a man with a face like stone, who slipped my stepmother an envelope when he thought I wasn't looking. And after my mom died, that man disappeared. I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe grief was warping my memory. But deep down, I knew. My stepmother wasn't innocent. She had secrets. And here's the truth I want you to understand, she underestimated me. She thought silence meant weakness. She thought endurance meant surrender. But every cruel night on that living room floor, every skipped meal, every insult she laced into her words, they were sharpening me. By the time I was old enough to stand on my own, I wasn't the broken boy she tried to create. I was a blade, quiet, but deadly when drawn. And believe me, I drew it. But that moment, that reckoning, that would come much later, in a courtroom filled with gasps and cameras flashing like lightning. For now, all I had was suspicion, pain, and a memory of my mother's smile that I refused to let her erase. Because here's the part she didn't understand, when you take everything from someone, you don't leave them empty. You leave them with nothing to lose. And that's the most dangerous kind of person you can create. So if you're watching this, know that what began as a boy's grief at a funeral became the fire that forged a reckoning. A reckoning that would tear the mask off her face in front of the entire world. And trust me, this is only the beginning. You see, after my mother's burial, life didn't just change. It fractured. My stepmother wasted no time establishing her rules designed to remind me every single day that I was an unwanted guest in my own home. I'll give you an example. Food. Something so simple. To you, dinner might mean family gathered around a table. But for me, dinner was a test. She'd scoop herself a full plate, and when it came to me, she'd pause, looking me straight in the eyes like she was weighing my worth. If she was in a decent mood, she'd let me eat. If not, she'd scrape the spoon against the pan and say, "You've got 2 hands, don't you? Cook for yourself." I was 12. Barely tall enough to reach the stove without standing on my toes. I burned myself so many times trying to fry eggs in the dark kitchen that my arms looked like a roadmap of scars. Clothes were the same story. You'd think a boy outgrows his clothes because of life, because of growth. But in my case, I outgrew them because she wouldn't buy new ones. Every time I asked, she said, "Your mother didn't leave me a dime for you. Do you think I'm made of money?" That was her favorite lie. That she was the victim. That feeding me, clothing me, keeping me under her roof was an unbearable sacrifice. She said it so often, I started to believe it. I started to feel guilty for existing. And that, I think, was her plan all along. Now, I know some of you watching this might be thinking, why didn't anyone step in? Why didn't a teacher, or a neighbor, or a relative notice? The truth is, people did notice. They saw the worn-out shoes. They saw the way I stayed late at school just to avoid going home. But when they asked her, she had an answer ready. "Oh, he's just stubborn," she'd say with a sweet laugh. "He refuses the new clothes I buy him. He insists on those old shoes." And people believed her. Because lies are easier to believe when they come wrapped in a smile. But behind closed doors, her mask slipped. And the words she saved just for me, they cut deeper than hunger or cold ever could. "You'll never be anything. You're nothing without me. No one will believe you." Imagine hearing those things on repeat, every single day, at the exact age you're supposed to be building your confidence. She wasn't raising me. She was burying me alive, piece by piece. But here's what she didn't realize, those words didn't just break me. They carved me into someone who paid attention. Someone who remembered. Because while she was busy making me feel worthless, I was quietly cataloging everything. I noticed the bills she kept hidden in a separate folder. I noticed the strange phone calls where she lowered her voice and stepped outside. I noticed how money seemed to vanish, even though we lived like paupers. I started keeping little notes. At first, they were childish scribbles. She went out at 11 p.m. She locked the drawer again. But over time, those notes turned into records. Receipts. Evidence. My own personal archive of her lies. And I clung to it the way some kids cling to toys. Because I knew, one day, I would need it. Still, the nights were the hardest. I can't sugarcoat that part. Some nights I cried until my throat burned. Other nights, I stared at the ceiling, imagining what my life would have been like if my mother was still alive. Would she be proud of me? Would she tell me that I mattered? Those thoughts were the only warmth I had. But I'll never forget the day everything shifted, the day I stopped being just her victim and started becoming her threat. It was a rainy evening. I was 13, sitting by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass like broken veins. She thought I was asleep, but I heard her on the phone. Her voice was sharp, not the syrupy tone she used for outsiders. She said, "The boy doesn't suspect a thing. By the time he's old enough, the money will already be gone." My heart stopped. I didn't know what money she meant at the time, but I knew one thing, I wasn't supposed to hear that. From that night on, I wasn't just surviving. I was listening. Watching. Waiting. Every insult, every slap of neglect, every night on that carpeted floor, it all became fuel. Because I had a secret of my own now, I knew she was hiding something big. Something that could one day turn the tables. And while she thought she was crushing me into silence, I was quietly sharpening my silence into a weapon. A weapon I would one day use in the very place she thought she owned, the courtroom. But that's a story for later. Because before I could expose her, I had to endure years of her control. And trust me, it only got worse. So if you think what I've told you so far sounds bad, wait until you hear what happened the day she tried to erase the last piece of my mother from the house. That was the moment I swore, one day, I would make her pay. By the time I was 16, I had mastered one skill my stepmother didn't expect: silence. She thought my silence meant defeat. She thought I was broken. What she didn't know was that silence was my camouflage. The quieter I stayed, the more invisible I became. And when you're invisible, you can move. You can plan. You can gather. Let me tell you something nobody talks about: growing up in a house that doesn't want you teaches you how to hustle. My stepmother never gave me pocket money, never bought me school supplies, never once cared how I'd get through. But what she didn't count on was my ability to adapt. I started small, cleaning up yards in the neighborhood, carrying groceries for older folks. At first, it was coins. Then, people started noticing my work ethic. By 14, I was mowing lawns, fixing fences, even running errands. And slowly, my pockets jingled with coins that weren't hers to control. But the real turning point? School. I discovered something she couldn't take away: my brain. I poured myself into my studies, partly because it was an escape, partly because it was the one area where she couldn't sabotage me. She tried, oh, she tried. She hid my textbooks, unplugged my alarm clock, even forgot to sign my school permission slips. But I learned how to adapt. I stayed late in the library, borrowed books from classmates, and woke up before dawn just to study in silence. By the time scholarship applications rolled around, my grades were sharp enough to cut through the lies she tried to bury me under. I applied to every program I could find, locally, nationally, even internationally. And when the acceptance letters came, so did the scholarships. You should have seen her face the day I got the big one: a full ride to cover my high school fees, plus a stipend for living expenses. For the first time in years, I saw her mask crack. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She congratulated me in front of the neighbors, but behind closed doors. She spat venom. "You think you're better than me because of this scholarship?" she sneered. "Don't forget who put a roof over your head." But here's the truth: that roof never belonged to her. It was my late father's house, and she was just squatting on his ghost. Still, I bit my tongue. Because I knew something she didn't: this scholarship was my ticket out. With the stipend money, I opened a savings account in my own name. Quietly. Secretly. Every paycheck from part-time jobs, every coin from odd work, I funneled it there. For once, I had something she couldn't touch. Of course, she tried. One day, I caught her rifling through my backpack. She claimed she was tidying up, but I saw the way her eyes darted when she found my scholarship documents. That was when I knew, she wasn't just resentful, she was watching me. Calculating. Waiting for her chance to strike. But I had my own calculations. Every insult she threw at me became fuel. Every obstacle she set became another reason to sharpen my focus. I didn't just want to survive her anymore. I wanted to win. And let me tell you about the first taste of that victory. I was 17 when I bought my first laptop with my own money. Nothing fancy, just secondhand, but it felt like a weapon in my hands. A door to the world she couldn't control. With that laptop, I started freelancing, graphic design, writing small jobs, anything I could learn. Suddenly, money wasn't just coins in my pocket. It was numbers on a screen, building up, quietly, away from her reach. And that terrified her. She started asking questions. Where are you getting this money? Who's helping you? I'd shrug, play dumb, pretend it was nothing. Because the less she knew, the safer I was. But she wasn't stupid. She could smell independence the way a wolf smells blood. And that's when she made her first move, the one that almost broke me. One night, I came home from a long shift at a grocery store, only to find my room stripped bare. My clothes, my books, even my laptop, all gone. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a cruel smile curling at her lips. Everything in this house is mine, she said. Never forget that. I stood there, fists trembling, heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. For a moment, I thought I'd lost everything. But then I noticed something. A mistake. She had missed the small envelope I kept taped under the dresser drawer. Inside were the bank details of my savings account, untouched. My true lifeline. She thought she'd won, but she didn't realize she'd only fueled my fire. That night, as I lay on the cold floor once again, I made myself a promise. A promise that one day, I'd take every single thing she thought she owned and strip it from her the way she stripped me. And trust me, I kept that promise. Because just a few years later, when I finally stepped into the courtroom, I wasn't that broken boy anymore. I was the storm she never saw coming. But before we get there, you need to hear about the final straw, the moment she tried to claim ownership not just of my life, but of my future earnings. That was the spark that lit the fire of my revenge. If you've been following this story, then you know by now that my stepmother wasn't satisfied with destroying my childhood. No. For her, pain wasn't complete unless she could twist it into profit. And the way she tried to do that, still chills me to this day. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope, sitting on the kitchen table like it had been waiting for me. She stood there, arms folded, a smirk pulling at the corner of her lips. "Open it," she said, almost sweetly. I tore it open, and my eyes froze on the words. Notice of claim. She was suing me. Not just for pocket change. Not for a little reimbursement. No, she was demanding $170,000. Itemized. Food. Clothes. Shelter. Even, emotional labor. Every single thing she claimed she'd spent raising me since the day my mother died. Let that sink in. This woman, who had starved me, neglected me, humiliated me, was standing in my kitchen demanding I pay her back for the privilege of surviving under her roof. I felt my throat close. I couldn't breathe. I looked up at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a sick joke. But she didn't laugh. She tilted her head, watching me like a predator enjoying the moment its prey realizes there's no escape. "You've been working, haven't you?" she said. "Saving money. I know you've got something hidden. And guess what? The court's going to make sure it comes to me." I can't even describe the cocktail of emotions that hit me then: rage, fear, disbelief. But above all, resolve. Because that was the moment I realized something: she wasn't just cruel. She was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. The lawsuit moved fast. Papers were filed. Dates were set. Suddenly, my name was on documents that painted me as an ungrateful child who'd leached off the kindness of a grieving widow. Neighbors whispered. People I thought knew the truth started avoiding me. To them, I was the villain, the kid who owed his stepmother a fortune. And she reveled in it. She dressed up for court appearances like she was auditioning for sainthood. Black dresses, pearl earrings, crocodile tears. She told anyone who would listen that she had sacrificed her life to raise me, and now I was turning my back on her. But what she didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that I had been preparing for this moment my entire life. Remember those notes I told you about? The ones I started writing as a kid? I still had them. Every incident. Every suspicious phone call. Every forged receipt I had stumbled upon. I had built a secret archive of her lies, and the lawsuit gave me the perfect stage to unleash it. Still, I'll admit. I was scared. Walking into that courtroom for the first time, my heart felt like a drum inside my chest. The walls were tall, the lights harsh. Reporters were already outside, sniffing for scandal. And there she was, sitting on the opposite side, looking like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. She even had the nerve to wave at me, like this was just another one of her little games. But this wasn't a game anymore. The judge entered. Papers shuffled. And then it began. Her lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a poor, selfless woman who had drained her savings to raise a child who wasn't even hers by blood. He listed expenses in a tone so serious, so methodical, that even I started to wonder if the room would believe him. Food, clothing, shelter, tuition, the numbers rolled off his tongue like bullets. Until he reached the grand total, $170,000. The courtroom gasped. I swear, even the judge shifted in his chair. And in that silence, I looked at her. She didn't look at me. She looked at the crowd. She was soaking in their sympathy, savoring the gasps, the murmurs, the pitiful glances. For a moment, I thought she had won. But then the judge turned to me. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I stood. My legs trembled, but my voice was steady. Because I had been waiting for this moment for years. And as I looked out at that room full of strangers, some ready to condemn me, some ready to pity her, I knew I was holding the one truth that could shatter her mask forever. I took a breath. Reached into my folder. And pulled out the first piece of evidence. But I didn't speak yet. Not yet. Because the silence before the storm is sometimes the loudest sound in the world. And believe me, when I finally spoke, the storm broke loose. And there I was, standing, heart pounding, palms damp, every eye in that courtroom fixed on me. My stepmother leaned back in her chair, smug, certain that the boy she had broken for years would crumble under the weight of her lies. But she didn't know me anymore. She didn't know the blade she had sharpened with every cruel word, every sleepless night. So I spoke. Your Honor, I began, my voice low, deliberate, steady enough that even the whispers faded. My stepmother claims she raised me, provided for me, sacrificed for me. But the truth is, she's been living a lie. And I can prove it. The words hit like a spark in a room filled with gas. Heads turned. The judge leaned forward. My stepmother's smile faltered, just a fraction, but I caught it. That crack in her mask. I pulled out the first document, a receipt she had forged. A rent payment supposedly made for my room and board. Except the landlord's signature didn't match, and I had the original to prove it. I handed it to the bailiff, and the judge's eyes narrowed as he compared the two. Then I dropped the second bomb, bank statements. Money transfers in her name, disguised as household expenses, but funneled into an offshore account under an alias. An alias linked to a man I remembered from my childhood, the man who had slipped her an envelope the night my mother died. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, the shuffle of reporters scribbling faster than their pens could move. But I wasn't done. Because the final piece, the photograph, was the one that would break her completely. I held it up for the room to see. Grainy. Old. But clear enough, the same man standing on a porch, a duffel bag at his feet, her beside him. This wasn't just a family friend. This was the man who had disappeared after my mother's sudden death. And then I told them. The memory that had haunted me since childhood. The late-night arguments. The envelope. My mother's sudden collapse. And how my stepmother had taken the insurance money, afterward, pretending it was for my care, while she siphoned it away to him. Her lawyer tried to object. Speculation, he barked. But the prosecutor, who up until then had been a background figure, rose with a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He requested the evidence be admitted. He asked for a recess to begin an investigation into fraud, conspiracy, and potentially something darker. And in that moment, the balance of the courtroom shifted. I looked at her. For the first time in years, she wasn't smirking. She wasn't smiling. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She tried to backpedal, stammering that she wanted to withdraw the case. I made a mistake. I don't want to sue anymore, she cried. But it was too late. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. This is not a game, madam. These are serious allegations. Officers, detain her until further review. The words hit her like a sentence already delivered. The police stepped forward. She started begging then, pleading, reaching out toward me. Please. Please, you don't understand. Let me go. I raised you. Raised me? That was the final insult. I met her eyes, steady, unflinching, and said, you didn't raise me. You caged me. And cages don't raise anything, they break it. You're dangerous, and I won't let you hurt anyone else. The officers took her by the arms. She thrashed, screamed, but they dragged her out as flashes from the reporters' cameras lit the courtroom like a storm of lightning. The room buzzed with shock. People stared at me, some in disbelief, some in admiration. But I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel victory. What I felt was release. Years of silence, of being made small, of swallowing every injustice, they had built up like pressure in a dam. And now, with one moment of truth, the dam had burst. I stood there in the eye of the storm, calm, almost empty, as if the weight I had carried all my life had finally been lifted. But the story wasn't over. Because court cases don't end in a single day. Investigations were coming. Trials. Headlines. My stepmother's secrets weren't done unraveling, and the man in that photograph, the shadow from my past, hadn't yet resurfaced. And as I walked out of that courtroom into the blinding flash of cameras, I knew this was only round one. Round one of the reckoning. Stage where the truth finally set me free. But the story doesn't end here, more secrets are still buried, and the reckoning has only begun. If you want to hear the rest, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Also, share this story with your friends, you never know who might need to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Your thoughts matter, and I'll be reading every single one.